So now we're going to have this is what this next hour and a half is going to look like. We're going to have a presentation. First is on the financing, the energy efficiency process, and the terrific work group is going to present their ideas. And then you're going to have a chance to comment, discuss, suggest, and I'll moderate that conversation. This is going to take us 40 minutes in total, 10 to 12 minutes for the presentation, and then a half an hour for the discussion. Then the academic strategy group's going to come up, and they're going to do the same thing. So that's where we are right now. Okay, I want to introduce Liz Clark, who's the. But first, wait, before we got to go back to the beginning. One of the really terrific partnerships that Tony has spearheaded at Second Nature is the relationship between colleges and universities that are interested in sustainability and NACUBO. It's really amazing idea, and it's taken time and a lot of hard work, but we now have a terrific relationship with NACUBO, who's really stepped forward and done some terrific things in relationship to sustainability. So I just wanted to let you all know that that's part of what Second Nature does. That's part of why we have an ACUPCC, so those activities can take place. And it's part of what the staff does in between and what Tony's leadership has provided. Some of the folks who've worked on the committee are here, some who aren't. Those who are here, Wendell Braze of UC Irvine had a major role in putting this together. Wendell. Huh? Amir from Delaware State. Okay. Jim Turner from, Steve Fisher from Ball State. Where's Steve? Did I leave anyone here out who was? Jim Lowe from Ball State.
Morgan Olson from Arizona State.
Morgan Olson from Arizona State. Where'd Morgan go? Disappeared. Those ASU folks, you know. They're all over the place. Anybody else? All right. Then some people who are not here. Kathy Lindahl, who's the SAP chair. She's at MSU at NACUBO. And Jim Turner of APLU. And now to introduce Liz Clark, who's put this wonderful presentation together. Liz is Director of Congressional Affairs at NACUBO, so she knows what she's talking about. All right, Liz, it's all yours. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me here this morning.
Liz,
yes.
Tell them about the document that they have it in their packet. Just so.
Okay, and we are discussing this morning the document in your packet. It's not on.
Do you want to come up here?
It's better. All right, if you haven't read it, we're discussing the Higher Education Leading the Nation to a Safe and Secure Energy Future paper. It's in your packets this morning. Just by way of background, I've been with the NACUBO doing congressional affairs for a little over a year, but have spent 13 years altogether in higher ed federal relations, working for a number of institutions. And by and large, most of my time has been spent looking at federal investments in financial aid, federal investments in research, and working on the appropriations process in those two realms. There certainly are many other issues that we follow that impact your institutions here in Washington, but year after year, typically the major focus is on appropriations for financial aid, research, and in the days of earmarks, academic earmarks as well. So Michelle Madia, who's now with Second Nature and has been with NACUBO, came to me about 6 months ago, a little more than 6 months ago, with this notion of a paper or a project or a strategy looking at sustainability on campuses, the financing of those efforts, and how NACUBO and ACUPCC and Second Nature could work together to talk about where we need to go from here given the current climate in Washington, the budgetary climate, the political climate, And what are the realistic next steps in terms of looking at that partnership? We put together a small group of advisors. We used the Sustainability Advisory Panel at NACUBO, which has been a longstanding group within the association, as well as brought in a few additional folks who could help us craft this white paper. And along the way, we did a number of meetings with third-party organizations, reaching out to some think tanks here in Washington. We met with several congressional offices, the Senate Energy Committee staff. We met with House Ways and Means Committee, the folks that write tax policy here in Washington, and did some reality checks with other lobbyists, tax lobbyists here in Washington, higher education lobbyists here in Washington, to get a feel and a sense for what might be realistic, what do campuses need, and how do we push the envelope a little bit and put something together that we think is achievable and helps all of our organizations achieve our goals. So with that, what we found is the federal government's actually doing quite a bit. 3 or 4 months ago, the Washington Post published on its federal page a slide that was used to illustrate all of the clean and renewable energy efforts across the federal government. And frankly, it looked like a bowl of spaghetti. It was a flow chart that hit, I want to say, dozens of agencies or sub-organizations within agencies, and there were dozens of programs across the federal government. But as we looked more and more closely at these programs, what we found was that some of them simply weren't funded. There's actually a grant program specific to higher education for clean and renewable energy efforts that would fund flat-out grants. It was authorized in 2007 and never funded. Congress never put any money into the program. We found, more significantly, a number of programs offered either through the Department of Energy or through the Treasury Department that were effectively tax credit programs that only tax-paying entities could take advantage of. So commercial businesses, manufacturers, there were tax credits, other grants in lieu of the tax credit, and being the public institutions or private institutions, private nonprofit institutions that you are, we can't thread that needle. We are unable to take advantage of those programs unless we hire up on attorneys and create all sorts of affiliated organizations, which, as you know, have administrative costs affiliated with them. And in some cases it works well, and in other cases it's an added level of burden for your institutions. So what we also found that I do want to acknowledge and that we can't forget is that there are plenty of there is acknowledgement by and large by the federal government in the role your institutions play in education and training in this area, as well as research in this area, and investments from NSF to the Department of Energy to the Department of Defense and elsewhere, and opportunities for competitive grants in the research arena. But by and large, there's been very little recognition by the federal government that your institutions have infrastructure and facilities that need to operate, and that we want to make investments in those facilities that address the climate commitment that you have. So with this, we came up with a white paper, and I would just note that in one of our meetings with a congressional staff person, we told her what we were setting out to do, and she said, yeah, she said, this is probably a good year for writing white papers. So, given the pressures on the federal budget, we knew that making a very large, very bold request for straight-out appropriations might not be the most expeditious effort here. But what we also recognize is, I'll ignore the financial cliff that we're headed to this fall with Congress needing to take action on a number of issues, but assuming they take care of that and they move forward with other intentions, The House Ways and Means Chairman plans to enact comprehensive tax reform next year. That's his goal. Chairman Camp's goal is to plan for comprehensive tax reform next year. Most Washington tax policy observers do agree that comprehensive tax reform is in the ether, and while it may not happen next year, we are going to see some type of major comprehensive tax reform within the next 2 years. So, seeing all these tax programs that we were left out of, knowing that there's budget pressure and that tax reform is actually being considered and there are lots of opportunities to engage in this discussion, we took a look at how we might be able to be a part of that conversation and what we might be able to lend as ideas and new programs. So what you'll see in the paper is a suite of 5 policy options that we've put forward. One is to allow tax-exempt revenue bond financing to prepay power purchase agreements. This is something that you as institutions cannot take advantage of, but is offered to municipal entities. So it's an existing policy. We're looking for essentially dialing it up and expanding the eligibility to that program. The second is looking at new energy efficiency and renewable energy loan options. And we put 2 ideas out there. One is the federal loan guarantee program, and 2 is a federal revolving loan program. And we put both out there because we know your institutions are very diverse, very different. Some of you are very tuition dependent and don't have large endowments, and others have very large endowments, are not as tuition dependent as others. Credit ratings vary from institution to institution, and where some large institutions may look at a revolving loan fund and say, I can get better terms elsewhere, fine, but there are some other institutions that might find benefits in a revolving loan program. So we want to put options out there that institutions from the smallest community colleges to the largest research institutions might be able to take advantage of. The third item on our list is to continue to pursue federal grant programs. Just because of the downward budget pressure right now, we do not want to let that go. We want to see Section 471 of the Energy Act of 2007 perhaps tweaked, but continued. There are some challenges in what's in current law, but the notion that there would be grant programs out there for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects should continue, and we should strive to see them funded and work on them in the same vein that we work on appropriations for student aid and for research programs. The fourth item is allowing long-term charitable deductions and tax credits for contributions of biomass and biomethane contributions. This one has a lot of head scratching, and people are a little curious as to what this means, and I'm going to do my best to explain it, although Wendell Brazzi is my expert here. Essentially, if your institution chooses to, say, invest in a biomass energy facility, and you choose to fund it over a period of 10, 20, 30 years, the financing organization, as well as you, want to make sure that you have access to the biomass that needs to go into this over the long term at an affordable rate. So if you can get a contributor to make a commitment for a certain period of time, we want to try to enable them to get a tax benefit, not just for the year they make the commitment, but for the duration of the time that they intend to make that commitment. That's that item in a nutshell. And the last item that we have is to both extend clean and renewable energy bonds, the CREBS program. Currently, public institutions are able to take advantage of this program. Private institutions are not able to apply for CREBS directly. You may benefit indirectly if a neighboring organization or entity has taken advantage of them, but you cannot apply to take advantage of them yourself. So those are the proposals in a nutshell. In terms of strategy, this conversation right here is step one. We want to hear your reactions, how you might enhance these ideas, as well as your thoughts on strategy going forward. We have engaged, as Mitch mentioned, APLU, And we plan to move this paper forward with the 6 large presidential associations. So I'm hoping that what you find in this paper is to your liking and that you would be willing to raise these as you engage with ACE, AACC, ASCU, NICU, all the other acronyms out there, and get those associations interested and engaged here. We'll be working with them from a government relations level perspective. I think this is something that you can engage students on, and if you have student organizations that you work with on these climate issues, the students are affiliated, as you know, with national organizations from USSA. If USSA finds an interest in this, that's an added voice we can lend to this. And frankly, right now, I think it would be great to demonstrate that students and college administrators can work together on common goals. I think that seems to be missing these days because of the student loan conversations and other conversations here in Washington on college costs. And I think this is a terrific opportunity to demonstrate partnerships with students. We also plan to go back to some of the think tanks that we've worked with. We've been invited to submit testimony next week to a Senate Energy hearing looking at energy financing options. So we will be sharing these ideas next week with the Senate Energy Committee. And from there, I'm going to actually turn it over to Mitch to serve as the moderator here for the conversation.
Okay, great, thank you. So questions, clarifications, additional ideas? Should stay there.
I can't have stunned college presidents into silence. That doesn't happen.
Where's Tom Kelly when we need him? No, just-
Well, I guess what I would say is, Wendell, do you have any additional comments that you want to add? You've been really instrumental in the development of this paper.
Well, I think the potential of this is to form some partnerships in higher education so that it's more than one entity, more than one organization that is playing this advocacy role. And we see that developing now in this great partnership that's formed between NACUBO and Second Nature and ACUPCC. And the APLU is getting more and more interested in this white paper and the positions being advocated. I would say this is a very sensible list. I mean, 5 items here, and you described them very well. You didn't need any help at all, as far as I'm concerned. These are not things that represent huge handouts from the federal government. These are tweaks in existing programs and in existing policy, which I think makes this a feasible list. And we tried to make a list that was feasible, that didn't just look like it was going in and asking for a big handout, because I don't think that's actually a viable position to take, especially in these fiscal times, given all the problems you know about. So I'm an advocate of this because of the reasons I've just said. I think it's a feasible list. I think it's a focused list. And I think when it has partnership behind it in terms of multiple higher education organizations taking a leadership role, this may have a good chance. And certainly the indications you've gotten so far have been pretty positive.
One other strategy element I would mention to you also is if your campus has a government relations staff and specifically a federal relations point person, I'm willing to bet they're very eloquent on protecting student financial aid. They're eloquent on protecting the major research budgets. They are probably not as eloquent on budget issues at your institution, and they're probably not as eloquent on these specific clean energy and energy efficiency issues, and would encourage you to engage in a conversation with them, or encourage you to encourage your business officer to have a conversation with them and see if this is something that they would conceivably or you would consider encouraging them to add to their portfolio here in Washington.
Okay, all the questions are going to be Vim, and then yeah, Ken and Steve.
Vim Bevell, Portland State University. I think it's great to have done this this policy piece, and I'm not enough of an expert on the particular financing mechanisms, but it sounds very plausible. But so the next step really, and you're taking some of it. But the problem with some of the large presidential organizations, as you know, is they have a long list of things that they are pushing. So it's not that easy to get to the top of their list. I'm the chair of an organization called the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities, and we've had our own legislative agenda. We're officially affiliated with APLU, but even so, it's not that easy to get the APLU government relations people to take on even the agenda of one of their affiliate organizations, much less, coming in from the outside. So I wonder whether we need to think about putting together a small group of the federal relations people of several of our institutions and strategize so you can really have somebody, a group of people to work with to see who of us has a congressional rep for whom this seems like a natural agenda to carry. And even in my own institution, I have to then think about, well, what else are we asking of that person? And I don't know who the right committee members are to do this. But I think that kind of a specific strategic approach is necessary rather than a general call for help or waiting for APLU and ACE to carry your water for it, because it isn't going to happen.
Thank you. Do you want to comment, or you want to?
Yeah, mine's a follow-up to that. I don't have a federal relations person in our 2,800 population school. It would help us if you would notify us which congressional people are on these committees when you want support, because I don't know which ones they serve on. And there's probably more influential schools, I'm sure, than mine. But if you would let us know, other than just a general call, and it really follows up on your comment, if you would let us know who we should contact to get the support, because we can call our congressional representatives. That's no problem.
Sure.
Yeah, very helpful comment. Both.
Tony has it.
Yeah, Tony?
Just a thought about this. When you're looking at this policy paper, one of the most important things I think we need to do is to make the case for why higher education should have the kind of treatment we're asking for higher education. And the case, I believe, has to be made around the idea that we are the transformative institution to create the next generation of technology and opportunity for economic development in the country. And because what happens with many of these policies is that the colleges and universities are getting lumped in with municipalities and with state governments, and they're not, and it's missing the role that we're not asking for special treatment for higher education as just another interest group, but we're asking for this treatment to provide many more opportunities for colleges and universities to find ways to finance these things as a demonstration of ways that we can transform the economy for all of the things that we care about here in the future. So as you're looking at this, and this may be someplace where the group of federal relations people can be helpful from the different schools, is are we making the case well enough that this isn't just one more thing that we're asking for just because we're higher education and we're now organized as a separate interest group? Because it isn't going to happen. And what we need to help people do is to go beyond the level, Liz, that you were talking about, where they understand the role of higher education in research and in education, that it really is about a demonstration and collaboration with local communities that this is the future for a sustainable economy, an economy that's going to provide all the jobs that we need. So making that case, if we haven't done it well enough in this policy paper, please take a look at that, because that's going to be very helpful in selling it to Congress.
Okay.
So I was just going to comment that I'm actually really pleased with the timing that we're looking at right now, because I think what has to happen right now is we need to do exactly what Tony just said. We need to make these ideas just a part of the conversation and drop that nugget into a lot of folks' heads, from policymakers to your own folks across campus, your business officers, your facilities managers, so that as they say, as your IT person who's one of the biggest users of energy on your campuses goes to an EDUCAUSE meeting, they can say, have you heard about this NACUBO Second Nature paper and the ideas that they have? Is this something EDUCAUSE can support? And to get the word out. And then in terms of looking at the strategy a little more closely, President Obama will be working on his budget proposal for next year beginning this summer, toward the end of this summer. And if he's reelected, the budget proposal that gets put together this summer is what we'll see come out early next year from the White House. And so dropping these nuggets of ideas works well timely there. In terms of kind of, again, just getting the idea out there, Congress isn't going to take these up this year. It's not going to happen. They have to figure out what to do with the Bush tax cuts. They have to figure out what to do with the expiration of the payroll tax, the expiring tax extenders. They have to figure out how the heck they're going to pass a budget this year and deal with the sequester. They're not going to take on new ideas this year. But behind the scenes, their staff are considering different ideas. Next year, they're really, I believe, going to start to get rolling. We're going to be set, whoever's the president and whatever Congress is elected in November, they're going to have their seats for the next 2 years, and I think we will see some kind of tax reform. So what we can work on is getting the word out now, and then developing the specific strategy. President Wiebel will certainly be calling on you because you have 2 tax writers in your delegation, and we know we'll keep you in the fold. And as we look at strategy, we'll be able to pick out which institutions, frankly, reside in beneficial congressional districts.
Well, I agree with what you're saying in terms of what's on Congress's list and what isn't going to get done. But let me just point out the obvious, since I've been doing this for a long time. Do not miss the opportunity to engage and have this discussion also with the 2 presidential campaigns. Because the reality is, if it's not on the radar screen in January, regardless of who it is that's going to be in the White House, it's very difficult to really build some traction around these things. I mean, we in the higher education community were successful to some extent in getting the stimulus pieces, particularly around investing in student aid. We didn't get the construction thing done because we learned after the fact that that's almost impossible to do campus construction on a national basis with virtually 50 different state rules and regulations. But it was worth the shot. But my point is, if you get it in there now, because we know who their advisors are, if we get it in there now, we can really build, and at least we have that base covered regardless of what happens in November.
Rachel and then Steve.
Completely
All right,
agree.
Steve and Rachel, you go after Steve.
Maybe I'm pointing out the obvious, but you mentioned there were 6 major organizations that are relevant to this, to the issues you're talking about. And it strikes me that opens a bit of a can of worms, a much larger issue, and that is, how can we take this incredibly salient, powerful issue of climate change and get agreement among all of those organizations to speak with one voice? While it's inappropriate to ask the APLU to carry our water for us, it is appropriate to ask them to sign on to a convention or an agreement that makes a general statement that we could then use for a number of different purposes, this included.
So I would just clarify, there's 6 what I call presidential associations. There are dozens of other higher ed associations specific, frankly, to college administration, not to mention the probably now hundreds of academic associations that are out there and active here in Washington, and most of them have at least a part-time, if not full-time or more, federal relations staff. That's a challenge that I've faced on a number of issues, and what I would say is you're probably not going to like the answer, but really it's an organic relationship that we have. NACUBO meets regularly with the major associations here in Washington, and when we can get down to the nitty-gritty specifics, often we can find ways to get people to sign on. We can pursue an opportunity for them to sign on. Right now, I don't see any snakes in the grass that would prevent them from signing on to a statement in support of these 5 policy options, but you don't know until you start talking with them. But that's probably the most reasonable course to pursue. But there's always a reason that folks can find to support something or not. And there's various nuances. The research universities are research universities, the community colleges are community colleges, the land grants are land grants, and there's a lot of individualization across these associations. Even though we're all part of higher ed, it's very hard to get everyone on the same page.
Rachel?
Yeah, this is great, Liz. Just two really quick suggestions or questions about other folks you may have engaged or be thinking about engaging. And one is the Congressional Green Schools Caucus, which is House-based, and the other is the Department of Education. Duncan just had a big win with Green Ribbon Schools program, and it's got his attention right now. So just thinking about the thing that planting a seed with them, and that being another inroad to a potential administration move.
I agree. I actually failed to mention that we actually do think that we could find support within the federal government for some of these ideas, both at Ed. I think Duncan, if not Duncan, his staff has said that they hope to extend the Green Ribbon Schools program to higher education institutions. I saw that somewhere. The department had a small focus on sustainability a few years ago with the Higher Education Act sustainability program that had been authorized there, but very little funding to support that. We also think that we may have some support through the Better Buildings Initiative. They specifically called on institutions of higher education to be supportive, and frankly, it was an effort to get institutions to say they would act a certain way and walk a certain way, but there were no federal incentives tied to that. And this is a way for us, for those that were engaged in that effort, to go back and say, look what we're doing, look at all the low-hanging fruit we've addressed. We've changed light bulbs, we've installed motion detectors, we've purchased electric vehicle fleets. Now we want to do more. We need your help to finance those next steps.
Yes. The EPA also, out of Jackson's office, is kicking off an increased focus on revolving loans and scalable retrofit financing models.
Any other questions?
Mitch, you had looked to me at the very outset, and so I've been patiently waiting. But I did want to just comment on something Tony said, and it's obvious, but anyway, I hope worth stating. And that is the sort of unique role of higher education, yes, making that case, yes, so that it's not just perceived as yet another interest group, advancing its parochial interests. And to me, one of the most powerful ways to do that is not to have higher education directly making the case by itself, but to bring the business community in, to bring the municipalities, mayors or other groups, to bring the faith-based groups in, and get them to say, yes, we all have our own interests, but higher education is one that's different, and it should be supported.
Thank you, Tom, for your considered contribution. David?
Well, just build on one of the things Tom mentioned in the list that he did, is that the corporate sector will actually execute the projects, the renewable energy and energy efficiency projects on campuses all around the country if these were approved in Congress. And wouldn't it make sense to enlist corporate sector partnership in advocacy and lobbying for these tax changes that we're advocating for, and not having it just be, higher ed, who many Congress folks and their staff listen a lot more attentively to the corporate environment than they do to us anyway. Does that make sense to think about?
It makes perfect sense. They've been terrific partners in supporting federal investments in research. They were very active in responding to the Gathering Storm report, and I actually, as I got to the meeting and went through the brown bag and saw Honeywell and others, those ideas started going through my head. There's a perfect connection there, and they can also help us understand how, in working with other corporate for-profit partners they have, what has or hasn't worked in terms of the specifics of the programs and what tweaks we might want to be aware of as we pursue these in specific legislative language.
You know, as a way of wrapping up, I'd like to invite anyone who is working on this project to answer one of two questions. One is, how should this paper now be used? You put a lot of effort into it. We all have it. How do you recommend this paper be used? Who should be reading it? And second is, what's next? What do we do now to follow up on your excellent work, or what do you intend to do to follow up on it? So it could be you, Liz, or anyone who's been involved in this, Wendell.
Well, since I have the microphone and wanted to say something before then, I'm over here. Dean.
Okay, good.
It's yes, 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 yes. I just want to build on both the last two pieces, and I just say, I know we keep saying it's not just how do we get everyone on the same page. I just want to remind, it's also how do we change the page? And I think that's the larger part, and that's part of what Tony was talking about. And just remember the power of the bully pulpit that you have, particularly inside so many of your communities as higher education, your access to alums, your access to, just as an influence in the community. And so just in addition to the discrete part of getting the tax part changed, language and an opportunity, even just an op-ed piece about this in that context begins to help shift the mindset across the board. Someone standing up in all those congressional town meetings that people have when they're in recess. I go to all of those when I don't seem to care about any of the other stuff, but it's to talk about certain things, so it's as much an opportunity to inform the rest of the constituency as it is to have a direct negotiation with that particular congressional member, because that's how we ultimately change the page, which then will, I think the rest of it will flow a lot easier. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Yes. We need a mic.
Thank you. Liz, first I want to thank you for all your hard work, and the other committee members. I think the product is beautiful. It came out wonderful. A couple thoughts. To answer your question, I think there's a lot of meetings that now are next steps, a lot of socializing this document with all the various groups that everyone's mentioned, the other higher ed groups, environmental groups, different parts of the federal government, Department of Education, Department of Energy, EPA, and so on and so forth. I want us, though, to all be sober that as we socialize this and as we talk to all those many people, they're going to have thoughts, too. And we should be open to our document being a living document. And as people have thoughts and as people give us feedback, we should be open to it. There might be additional ideas that people come forward with. And so we should view this document as we move forward as a living document, and also eagerly listen to the feedback we're getting from the many groups and sort of work on this in that sort of an approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there Tony, did you want to say something?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think that this has been a terrific discussion. Yesterday, we at the steering committee meeting, we had a really robust discussion with our corporate partners about ways that our corporate partners and the colleges and universities could work together better to both improve the way the reducing the carbon footprint and reducing costs and stuff on the campus, and also about how do we create the incentives for to meet the educational needs of these corporations that are trying to become more sustainable in every aspect of what they do. And we did talk about this, and we asked them to think about what they could be helping on this particular strategy. So we did talk about the idea that the corporate partners could help in selling this strategy. The one thing that I want to make sure that, I want to say it again because I think it's really critical. Diane Dillon Ridgely said, change the page. The page right now is that higher education is another interest group. You know, just asking for a handout, and this is a different form, and maybe it's a little more sophisticated. The page change is to make the case that if we really want to affect the affordability and the accessibility for higher education, we've got to look at some of the structural costs in higher education. And here's one where just some changes in incentives by the federal government could change things. The second thing on changing the page is to have people in Congress understand that the higher education is the leadership entity to creating a sustainable economy, and that without that we can't do it. And I just want to make sure that we are making that case well enough so that whoever goes to have those meetings can have that with chapter and verse. And one thought that it stimulated to me is all of the projects that have already been done on campuses and save money, reduced energy, reduced the carbon footprint, we need to get some data on how many jobs were created as a result of that, and how many local, and how many, what local benefits have occurred. We don't need to have a comprehensive thing across all of higher education, but if we had a couple of dozen examples that could show that, and show what a benefit, and get the people in the communities to talk about what the benefit was that occurred, and the business people to talk about what the benefits were that occurred, then I think we have a chance at changing the page, as Diane said. And I think that was well said, Diane Dillon Ridgely, wherever you are. I can't see you from here. But that's really what we have to do, because the discussion with David Orr this morning was really about changing the page. It was about changing the mindset. And so we need to help educate the congressional leaders and the people inside the federal government about how to change the page that creates more opportunities and allows the creativity of what higher education can bring to really shine for the purpose of the benefit of the entire country. So when we're thinking about that, I just want to plant that seed, because when I was reading the document, I love it, it's terrific, I love all the policy stuff, but it's still, if I'm trying to put my hat on as a congressional person and thinking about all of the other stuff, it didn't jump out at me that this is absolutely something that is critical that we need to take on for really the issues around affordability and access and advancing the whole educational agenda. So, and so I just want to share that, because we need you to take a hard look at it also to see whether it really makes that case and how we make that case. And we're very happy to work with all of you to try to make that case over the next 2 or 3 months, so that you guys can do your job better in doing it. Okay?
Yeah, and I think to follow up on, Kent, yes.
Hi, Kent Anson. I'm on the Second Nature Board, and I work for Honeywell. And just, Tony, to your point on jobs, that we have, as industry, we have that data. So we've had to already put that data into many documents in Washington to calculate when the work is done, how do you go about doing that? So I think your corporate partners can probably help you on that front.
That'd be great. We have a number of schools that have that information too, and
And just a reminder, if you're interested in the question of access and affordability in relationship to opportunity and innovative financial mechanisms, then that's the group that you should go to at our final session. There's a lot more to be discussed in this regard, especially in relationship to innovative financial mechanisms. Thank you so much, Liz. Can we have a round of applause for us? Yeah. Well, the next group is the academic, I don't know the exact name. What's the exact name of the group? The Academic Strategy Group?
It's the Academic Committee.
Academic Committee,
Yeah.
Okay. And this is a really terrific example of partnering with ASHE, Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Cindy Thomashow, yes, there is a relation, she's my spouse, is the Director of Education at ASHE, and she has spearheaded with a whole bunch of folks from the ACUPCC, a working group where they've gotten provosts from around the country together to talk about some of these issues. It started late last year with some phone conversations, and then there was a symposium in Phoenix, which was really terrific, that some of you who are here attended. Rather than try to call out the names of everyone, can everyone who's been involved with the academic committee please stand up right now? Okay, and just very briefly state your name and affiliation.
Rick Dorters from Worcester College.
Okay.
Tom Kelly, University of New Hampshire.
Maria Harper, Maricopa Colleges. Deb Johnson, Pratt.
Corey Coach, Portland State University.
Rick, can you do yours again?
Rick, we didn't hear yours because you and Tom both spoke simultaneously. So we need you to introduce yourself one more time.
Rick Dorgerson, Luther College.
There we go. And Cindy?
Cindy Thomashow, I'm an education manager at ACUPCC.
We miss anybody?
Neil.
Neil. Okay.
I think you said academic committee. There are a lot of CAOs who are
Are there CAOs who are here who are part of this working group? Any other CAOs? Okay, well, we've covered it. I just want to make sure that you know that these people have been working really hard to put together this great report. Deb Johnson and Roy Koch are going to present the report, and Deb is the Academic Director of Sustainability at Pratt Institute, and Roy is still, for a little bit more time, the Provost at Portland State University. Okay.
We're getting our.
Well,
I just wanted to be able to see.
our first PowerPoint of the conference.
There we go.
Not bad, huh?
The art and
One of our
design
preferred-
types can't do anything without PowerPoint, right, Deb?
Whoops, it's all running on its own. So it's these microphones are working?
We're gonna have
Do
to
the
see.
podium.
All the microphones are working.
This
Oh,
one
those
is
I don't
not.
know.
Okay. I choose the one that's not working, but, oh, great, thank you. Just easier than standing behind the podium. So we're here to talk about a kind of groundbreaking event that happened last March as a result of an intent to get provost CAOs together to really look at how do we do the integration of sustainability into our curricula. It's one of the biggest challenges that we've been facing, and historically a lot of the conversation has shifted to facilities and energy management and those sorts of things. And so it was really key to essentially bring together a group of people similar to what we were doing today and get their perspective on how to take this challenge on and move through it. And so the basic history, and Mitch talked about it a little bit, no? Oh, that's all right. I'm seeing it, so that's all I really need. The second nature, I don't know. Is the AV guy here?
Well, it was just, yeah, no, I'll go get him, but did we just disconnect something when the...
Is it on?
Okay.
Okay, it's very delicate, very delicate. So really the history in all of this is that Second Nature and ACUPCC got together and said, how do we make this happen? And put together an academic advisory committee of about 12 people from various types of colleges around the nation, from community college systems, private colleges to state colleges, and got about 30 of the provosts and CAOs in the room to have a conversation. This was in March at ASU last year, and it was a day-long session where we worked together to really come up with some key strategies.
Actually, I can stand behind.
Okay, great.
And we can both be here together.
Here we go.
I'd like to reinforce what Debera said. As a CAO, we've watched what are some obvious opportunities for our campuses as we deal with our physical infrastructure. And in many ways, we've gotten our students involved and maybe some of our faculty involved. But I think an equal contribution institutions make, and from my perspective, maybe even a bigger one, is the fact that we graduate tens and hundreds of thousands of people every year who go into the workforce. And the question is, are they prepared to live in a different kind of, or create a different kind of world? And that's the issue that we had the opportunity to deal with at this conference. And it's an exciting problem, but it's also a difficult, certainly not a trivial problem. How do we look at our curriculum? We've all been involved in curricular change over the years. How do we look at our curriculum, at our faculty and others, and really begin to do that? So the participants in the conference were a combined group of chief academic officers and sustainability officers from a variety of campuses. I'm not going to read down through the list, but you'll note that there is a broad diversity of campuses represented, and so we were looking at sort of abstracting our thoughts so that they might be useful across the various campuses, noting that not everything is going to be useful to everyone everywhere. So you can see the geographic diversity from East Coast to West Coast. It was in Phoenix, so some of us had a little closer proximity. But we saw research universities, private liberal arts colleges, community colleges all represented there. And similarly with the sustainability directors, we saw a range of institutions represented. So we did have a sort of broad and engaging conversation.
And I think it was great, maybe from Pratt's perspective, and I do a lot of work with art and design college system across North America, to hear the perspectives from these various areas, really open kind of new possibilities and opportunities to do things. So it really had a great benefit, I think, generally for the group to kind of sit up and listen, and similar to what's happening here.
It also had the additional advantage that it brought some of us who hadn't been deeply involved in this conversation together with a bunch of people who had. So we made a bunch of new friends, and we have all similar interests. What I want to talk about is the general outcomes of this discussion, which was to create a sort of action or a strategic plan for the academic initiative around sustainability and climate action. You have in your packet a very brief summary of this. There are 3 goals and 6 objectives, and somehow over the phone we managed to make this into 5 points on a PowerPoint slide. So
we do have to congratulate the work done by the academic committee after the event to really piece down tremendous amounts of information into 5 very clear strategic points.
Right. And so each time we talk about it, we synthesize it in a slightly different way and more effective and obviously more parsimonious approach. But I would just briefly go through these. The first is a major activity that many chief academic officers are involved with, and that's the strategic planning activities, or at least the academic planning activities of the institution. And we felt like the first step is to provide an opportunity to embed these ideas and these principles into the visions of the institution, the missions of the institution, the values of the institution, and the academic plans of the institution, so that there's a clear connection between the sustainability and climate-related activities and the real objectives, or the documents that you share publicly about the institution. A second phase was supporting CAOs in learning a little more about what the opportunities are, what this is all about, what work has been done up to now, and to give them some sense of where we are with this thing, encourage participation. A third was to use the networks that have been created, that have been discussed already. APLU has been thrown around quite frequently, but there are many professional networks that we all have that have been around for a long period of time. And taking what we know here and what we've developed here in this group and bringing it out to those networks can be very important, and we think potentially very effective way. We'd like to also provide support for the chief academic officers as they try to develop programs on their own campuses around curricular reform, the integration of sustainability ideas into the curriculum, faculty development. Many faculty might like to do this, but they may need some help in terms of finding resources in creating pedagogies. We've talked a lot about community engagement today and getting involved with the community, those sorts of things. And finally, in the true chief academic officer fashion, we have an assessment goal where we'd like to know if this makes any difference, but we just don't know quite how to do that. So we think we need to spend a little bit of time looking at what we do and trying to find ways to really evaluate whether certain activities are making a difference in terms of student learning, in terms of the ability to place students, those sorts of things, and would be working in that regard. And what we wanted to do is just note that there is work going on in each of these areas already. In fact, considerable amount of work. And this only represents what we've known about and in effect what was happening with the group that attended the the summit in Phoenix. But in terms of embedding sustainability into the sort of the fabric of the institution through the mission, the vision, the strategic plans, we would note that Green Mountain College has recently created a new strategic plan where they have a goal of creating authentic sustainability by 2020. And I think President Bill Troop is here with us today. So I will, oh, bad data. Sorry. Okay, oh, Bill, sorry. I gave you a promotion. Bill. Sorry about that. But can talk about that. There will be people here from the meeting who will be able to talk about some of these very particular activities as well.
Another snapshot is what we're doing at Pratt Institute, leading the Partnership for Academic Leadership in Sustainability, which is a group of about 30 schools getting together and really understanding how do we, as a peer group of schools, support together faculty development or programming or leverage the resources that we have. When I went and spoke to the various presidents of the ACAD schools, which is the Association for Independent Colleges for Art and Design, I said to them, this is a place where we need to collaborate, not to compete, that it's really important that we work together and we find a new infrastructure for collaboration that's going to serve us in the future, because this is not just value divided by 30 in terms of 30 schools paying to create certain value, but it's also value multiplied by 30, especially for our students who need to create deeper, stronger networks as they move into the world. So you don't just graduate necessarily from Pratt, but you graduate connected to all of the ACAD schools.
I've mentioned the idea that the work in this group could be diffused throughout the higher ed community. There are many examples, and you've heard about some of them today. The Council of Independent Colleges provides a forum where this may be possible. The American Association of State Colleges and Universities, a group of over 600 public institutions, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and we could go on and on. Similar organizations with our community college colleagues. I noted in the sessions that we had in Phoenix that serving on the executive committee of the CAO group of APLU, we are worried about all kinds of things, as my president pointed out a little earlier, a lot about retention, a lot about affordability and access. But I didn't take the initiative, or haven't taken the initiative, to bring this to the table, to organize sessions around it, to do those sorts of things. So it becomes part of the thinking in terms of curricular design, a way to deal with the affordability issue, a way to deal with the access issue, a way to deal with the retention issue. So we think there are great possibilities there in terms of moving that agenda forward. The whole issue around curricular development and faculty development we think is absolutely important, and there's a lot of good examples around the country in this regard. At our own campus, we've spent some time creating undergraduate learning outcomes, and sustainability is one of those. And that was the easy part. Now we have to figure out what that means in terms of how you implement it in the curriculum, both in the major but also across general education. Luther College has created a RFP for faculty development to help their faculty be able to integrate these concepts into their classes. And Maricopa Community College has a green workforce curriculum as well. So in all types of institutions, there's a number of projects going on there.
It's true, and I think it's really important to start looking at developing, almost like research and development, looking for new models to integrate into our systems in order to create change and acceptance and make these things happen. And one of the things, going back to the assessment aspect, is the NSS study of sustainability engagement and the University of Michigan's literacy studies, both that are really looking to tie sustainability to the viability of our institutions, which I think is really critical, that we need to be measuring against not just this is a good thing to be doing, but that this is viable to our higher education. But when I was listening to Tony speak earlier, really viability of the nation is tied up in this, and that it's that big a picture for us. So the next step for you all is to take on the 5 challenges, and Mitch is going to lead you through some Q&A and discussion about what challenges do these goals and objectives create for leadership. I mean, that definitely gets right in the way of what you're trying to do, some of these things. And there are lots of barriers and challenges and opportunities in all this. And then what are the actions that are necessary to pursue these strategies immediately? What do we dig into first, and how do we start moving this forward? So Mitch, we're going to hand it over to you. Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, you can go next.
Oh, here you go. Great.
No, you should stay up here. If people have questions, and they may want to ask you these questions. You know the routine. Are there questions related to this, especially the questions that were on the board? Tom, I knew we could count on you to get it started.
Fools rush in where. I just wanted to kind of, in my own mind, make a connection that, again, is probably obvious, and that is there's value in pulling together just the CAOs to focus, but I think it's important, so I guess as a question, are there provisions made to ensure that we take this issue farther out and can connect it up with the infrastructure piece, connect it up with all the other financial piece? Many of the corporate sector partners here and in many other forums we've all been part of say, we're not getting what we need when students graduate. We need, different outlooks, different skills, different competencies. So they have a stake in this. So I think if we could really build a cross-sectoral engagement with this question of curriculum, it could both help with internal impediments as well as reinforce the case for some of the legislative changes that were talked about in the previous session.
Yes.
And I'd like to take that idea one step further. I'd like to take that idea one step further and say the chief student affairs officers are critical in this movement, not only for the co-curricular oversight that they have that will complement all of the curricular sustainability programs, but also the notion of the partnering between academic and student affairs, getting rid of that island between and making sure that student affairs is just as equal a partner at this discussion as they should be.
That's a really great point. Integrating orientation, all aspects of residence life, making them part of the curriculum. It's a wonderful thought and idea, and thank you for contributing that. Yeah. Other thoughts? I'd also be curious to know from the presidents, what they can do to help move this initiative forward. Stephen, here you go. Okay.
I went before my faculty a few months ago, and I asked them to endorse the proposition that we frame the entire institution under the framework of sustainability science, which has been identified by the U.S. National Academy as a way forward. Sustainability science has a lot of advantages, and one of the important understandings of that is that its foundation is a strong foundation in the humanities and liberal arts, first of all. And I think many of us need to be much more bold in defending the liberal arts, because that's where we turn out students that have critical thinking, competency in oral and written communication, et cetera. And these are skills that are absolutely essential to sustainability practice. And so the second element to look at that is that it helps integrate your curriculum through transdisciplinarity. And that term has a specific meaning. It essentially takes your upperclassmen and trains them to be knowledge brokers by bringing the different disciplines through them to address a particular problem. And there are many, many spin-offs from this that I think are very valuable.
And Stephen, not that I have any inside information, because I certainly don't, and how did the faculty respond?
They voted unanimously to do this. And that surprised me as much as it might surprise you. But Unity College has a huge advantage. One is having my predecessor Mitch lay the groundwork very very delightful framework to be able to work within. Secondly, we have a very focused mission. We are an environmental college, and there are a handful of us here today, Green Mountain, Paul Smith, others, that have this same opportunity to step out and be very explicit about this. But my former position was to direct the environmental science program at the University of Idaho, and we did the same thing within that program, which was intercollegiate. We went across the colleges, and we encountered the standard silo issues that you can imagine. I had a dean say to me, "One of us has got to go." So, yeah, the reality is that it remains an issue, but this transdisciplinary approach does a lot to obviate it. It's a huge tool.
Thank you. David Caruso? And wait, someone back there first? Yes, and then David, you after. Yes.
Oh, okay. One of the key takeaways that I will have from this meeting is the conversation that we had with our corporate partners yesterday afternoon. And that really opened my eyes in terms of what they need, what corporate America needs in terms of the preparation of our students. And I hope that there will be an opportunity for them to share some of their thoughts with this group at some time.
That's a great point. And if any of the corporate council partners have something to add during this session or later, please do so. By way of example, one of the things that we discussed yesterday at that meeting was it turns out that some of these corporations have done some exemplary work in ecological cost accounting. They have fairly sophisticated methodologies and protocols for how that gets done. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a college or university where the chief financial officer or the procurement officers have worked it through to the same extent. I'm not saying there aren't any that have done it, but here's a terrific area where just on substance alone, we could really move the curriculum forward and develop these kinds of partnerships. So I think that's, any other thoughts around that would be most welcome. David.
Is this working? Now it's on. Thank you. I wanted to bring to the surface an issue that I've always found compelling and problematic. And I think these are enormous challenges to put in front of chief academic officers of our institutions. And in large part because their role is to work with the faculty, and some of these specifically suggest, number 1 and number 4, for example, changing faculty orientation and thinking about curriculum. And I think one of the problems that we all face is sort of based in a bit of delusional thinking, and that is that we get the idea too often because we hang out on our campuses that the faculty work for us. And actually, a lot of this has been studied. And faculty loyalty is much more to their discipline, their national professional associations, their colleagues across the country at other institutions are they're much more concerned about what those colleagues think, if you're in Nebraska, what your colleagues in the other 49 states think of, than your friends down the hall in the English department, if you're in the history department. And the control of the curriculum, which is driven by the emerging knowledge base in every discipline, is much more under control of those professional associations that each discipline has. So I really think we need to kind of triage our thinking about this if we're going to create a long-term sustainable change in the way faculty think about curriculum and about pedagogy. We really have to have allies in the professional association world, and not on the campuses necessarily, but off the campuses, and really, try to move beyond this kind of delusional thinking that the faculty work for us and that we can influence them directly on the campus when the domain of influence is external.
Cindy, could you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the professional associations? She needs to mic. You need a mic.
one of the things that I've been doing with ACI is working with the disciplinary associations, to your point, and they're very excited about having sustainability integrated into a lot of the work that they do. So they just invited me to go to the AAC&U association meeting, the annual meeting, to present the ways that we can begin to embed sustainability across disciplines. And you're right, we do have to get to those associations and societies in order to make a difference. Part of why they're interested is because of this very successful CAO work that we've been doing. Because they're saying if our provosts are behind it and the disciplinary associations are behind it, then we can actually start to see the difference.
Yeah, I've refrained from comment other than to joke around a little bit, but I want to build on what Tony was saying before in the last meeting, in the last session. I feel very strongly, I'd like to support Stephen's point, I feel very strongly it's the role of presidential leadership and the role of the provost to move this forward. And I think it's our job to express why this is so important and why it's way beyond any particular substantive interest. It has to do with access, it has to do with affordability, it has to do with the planetary challenge that David Orr mentioned before. And if we can't be bold in making that point, who's going to do it? Now, I understand fully well, because I was at a small college, I understand fully well that in some of the bigger systems you've got all kinds of issues that you have to be dealing with that I can't begin to really grasp. But still, there are big system presidents who are behind this and have done a terrific job at doing so. So I just want to mention that to all of us that are here. We, as presidents, we have way more power than we think and much less than we like. Other comments? Yes.
Yeah, Mitch, just to follow up on the comment about what we're looking for when we're hiring students, couple quick points I made yesterday. One is that in our business, because we're in a buildings business and we're promoting to all of you, it's not just the people that are going to be promoting the product, it's anybody. You can be a lawyer, you can be an accountant, whoever it is we hire, if they're going to be in our business, they've got to talk sustainability. Because if the rest of our business is engaged with you, they've got to be there right away. So that's one. Secondly is that we always see that a lot of the programs don't always connect the economics to the sustainability. And so our message is always just connect those two together, because if the person can do one side without the other, it doesn't always work well. So the interdisciplinary programs, the more you can work the programs so they have both of those sides, is very valuable. And the last piece I just say is that when you do implement very, very large projects, there are some schools that work that into the curriculum, work that into students, and there are others that just do the project. And so most of those in this room, I'm sure, do that, but if you're not, that's a tremendous opportunity to work together as well.
Did you get up because you want to say something? Okay, all right. Yeah, other thoughts on this?
Mitch?
Yes.
A couple of things. First of all, this group has come up with this as a 5-year strategy. Okay, so we're not expecting we're going to be doing this overnight. So as you're thinking about it, when we get into the next session, we want to please think about what do you think we should do this year, what the next year, and that would be really good guidance for us. I'd like to go back to what Diane Dillon originally said about changing the page. I think conceptually, if we talk about integrating sustainability into the curriculum, it's the wrong frame. The frame, it should be, how does all of our educational experience lead to a healthy, just, and sustainable society? And it really is about reframing the notion that sustainability is not just about the environment, but it's really about the sustainability of humans on a planet that's really stressed and continues to be stressed. And that's why we need the mindset change. And so in essence, it's just a very simple idea. Would we deliberately educate people that would create an unsustainable, unhealthful, and unjust society? No. But in essence, that's what we're doing de facto. We're not deliberately trying to do that. So we're talking about needing a mindset shift. And so if we talk about the idea that really this is about a transformation of the higher education experience so that all of our graduates can lead to everybody being as healthy as possible, living in strong, secure communities, participating in the governance of society, having a decent job, And in order to do that, we have to find a different and better relationship with the natural world. And so if we continue to try to figure out ways that we can stick it in to chemistry or into different disciplines like that, you're going to continue to run up against the same framework. And just as you said very appropriately that the presidents and the provosts can have the bully pulpit, and they, you know, the provosts can talk about not only have the role of developing the curricular, the educational direction, but they also help to allocate resources. And as we talked about it in the summit that we had, the CAO summit, the connection between what is going on the operational side and the educational side becomes really important. So for example, if we tied the reduction in cost that comes from energy efficiency and conservation to faculty development so that they can transform the way they're teaching that leads to sustainability, or other ways to take some of that savings going right back into the academic program. So we're creating an institutional incentive for people to think that way. We need those cross things. The other is that, to David Caruso's point, you know, it may be difficult to go and just talk to the faculty directly, but one of the reasons we wanted the corporate partnership is that if the corporations are saying we need people that have the following knowledge, skills, and values, that's going to help drive educational change, because even the faculty that don't want to are going to look at whether or not the students are going to be able to have jobs. And so what we need a kind of when we're thinking about the strategy, it needs to be holistic, but I think we need to start with getting the frame right. And the frame has to be that this is about the fundamental purpose of higher education, not just adding a little sustainability into this where we can and how we can. So as we think about this, and you think about what you can do and recommendations that you have about this strategy, please think about the ideas of what you can do to help with changing the page, so to speak. That's what you've tried to do, Rick, at Luther College, and done very effectively. And there are a lot of examples of people and they're doing, Neil, you're doing the same thing at Dickinson College. And a number of places are trying to do that. But it's really about the idea that this is not about sticking sustainability into the curriculum, but reorienting the curriculum and the educational experience that results in all the graduates coming out with the knowledge and skills that would lead to a sustainable society. A sustainable society, not a planet. Okay? And if I'm sorry to be, you know, sounding like I'm pontificating here, but honestly, I have to tell you, after all the years of work, if you don't change the frame, you don't change the activity. And that's the frame that I think we need, and I think the frame that's missing. And that's where the bully pulpit of you as presidents and the provost can really make a difference, and so can you in the corporate sector.
And so what we're interested in, and how we're going to end the day later with the final session, which is why we really hope to stay, is what specific suggestions you have so that you can maximize the effectiveness and leverage of your own leadership to begin to make this happen. And we can start with some thinking around that right now. Ideas? Yes.
If I might, John Dunn, I'm at Western Michigan University, the president there, and we're a campus of 25,000 students, and I really applaud the work of the committee looking at the chief academic officers, and I thought the comment earlier was extremely astute about student affairs.
Yes.
Because that's your residential living, that's your water usage, it's your light usage, your energy source, and also in a place like ours to make things actionable, trayless meals, for instance. That's all in residential living, a trayless meal in terms of reducing a waste of food. I'm going to I agree with the comment about changing the frame, but having dealt with this for some time and with faculty senates and all the governance structures we have in university, particularly a large university, it's very complex. I also want to hearken back to the basics, okay? And one of the things that we preach to try and get our faculty attention and also our student attention and orientation is this is our campus, okay? We live here. This is our home. So among other things, we don't throw paper on the ground here. And if we do, we pick it up. Okay? When I was at Oregon State many, many years ago, Bob McVicker, the president there, would never walk across campus without picking up a piece of paper and throwing it away. It was the most powerful visual image of let's take care of this place. There are some hardheads, and we have some in our political parties, that will never deal with the in-cloud conversation as they see it. But if you talk with them about picking up paper, they kind of get that. They may see it as somebody else's problem, but they get it. They understand it. So while I think we need to turn the page, we also need to not overlook some of the most primitive things that we can do to remind people. I get really upset with students who are into the whole sustainable movement. But hell, they're throwing their cigarettes on the ground. They're throwing paper. Come on, give me a break here, right? It starts with the basics as well, and we've got to remember that to reach certain people at different levels. One other thing I would quickly add, I think one of the most powerful things that we do is on our orientation of all new students, when we're locking them in, they're signing on. When they do their tour of campus, there's a sustainable tour. And it's not only about buildings, it's about plannings. It's about why have we done certain things the way we have? Because we care about the place. And if you can resonate that and get that into them early, then I think there's opportunities. We have a student sustainability fee that they voted themselves. They monitor that. They know what that means, and they do good things with it. So, in any event, just a few comments, and Ray, it's good to see you again. Thank you, Roy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Neil, and then Gibb.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with Tony about setting a frame and setting strategic direction, and there are lots of ways to do this. One of my favorite example from our college lately is that for reasons that had nothing to do with sustainability, we decided to translate the diploma from Latin to English, and in the process, we were able to change the language. So the old Latin says the students receive rights and privileges by virtue of having their bachelor's degree. And now they have rights, privileges, and responsibilities, including to their planetary home. So a lot of this can be done, but there's one other very major thing I think that's going on in higher education that we do need to connect with and can connect with. There's been a lot of work done, especially by AAC&U, about best practices, or what they call high-impact practices in curriculum and in education generally. And I just suggest you take a look at the list of those practices and compare it with a list of what would be best educational practice with sustainability, and they are extraordinarily congruent. So that from a provost perspective, there's a real potential to tie integrating sustainability into the educational program, remaking the program around sustainability by referencing faculty to the kinds of educational practices that work best. Faculty are attracted to those, and they're all open doors to sustainability. We shouldn't overlook that.
Thanks for that comment. And in relationship to that, one of the great bipartisan efforts in terms of curriculum is the emphasis on service. And service and sustainability go hand in hand. Giff.
Thank you. We had the luxury of starting with a changed frame. So our goal in starting our school was to create a just and sustainable society through transformation of business education. And as we've moved along, we've encountered some problems. And one of those problems had to do with disciplinary silos and the fact that in order to do a whole systems approach, we still had professors who were stuck within their disciplines. Last summer, we put together a whole large group of faculty to create a new integrated curriculum, and we did away with courses like marketing, finance, operations, and so forth, and put them all into large courses that were integrated. So the course would include marketing, finance, and so forth. Of course, it was a huge problem with our faculty who were feeling that they were having stuff taken away from them because they couldn't sit there and pontificate on their particular subject, and they had to integrate with each other. But the faculty volunteered their time to spend a week designing the new curriculum, and then in smaller groups on each of the courses that came out. And at the end of the first year, what we found is that our students are ahead of where they would. We look at the presentations that they made at the end of the first year, and they're doing better in finance and marketing and so forth than they were the previous year, as well as thinking about this as an integrated whole. And so I throw that out. I mean, we're lucky. We can pretty much do whatever we want to do compared to the average school. We don't have tenured faculty and so on. But the idea of building large integrated courses where you take on whole problems and then look at them from lots of different disciplines, as opposed to having courses in which you teach the disciplines, strikes me as something that maybe you can't do it in your core, but you could certainly do it, for example, if you were a business school in your second year, and that this has proved to be incredibly fruitful for us. And that's even in the blundering first year where we were making it up as we went along. I think it'll be even better next year.
And in case you haven't met Giff, he's the president of the Bainbridge Graduate School. And I just want to say that no, you can't do anything you want, because having been at Antioch for many years before I was at Unity, if you're not bringing students in with your excellent curriculum, you're not going to have a college. And the small startup colleges know this. So we have to make sure that as we frame curriculum with new pages or whatever it is, it's relevant and pertinent enough that the students are going to come and give us their revenue so we can have a college.
And for what it's worth, we have better enrollment this year than we had last year. So the students going out and talking about this new curriculum has in fact brought in new students.
Thank you. I think we maybe have time for one more comment, if there is one. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm so glad. Amir Mohammadi from Delaware State University. I was really struggling with the additional curriculum, and I'm so glad, Tony, you addressed that, because as part of the lessons learned, so that we don't repeat history if the history was not good. And I'm so glad you also clarified. It's a worthy goal, but whether we have a worthy means to get there, it's like creating some common sense bachelor degree. Would it work? Maybe it would, but I don't know if it would work. But really, it's just a matter of how do you get this done without adding additional cost? As I heard, I just want to thank you, Tony, and thank you, Tony. Yesterday we heard accessibility, affordability cannot happen without accountability. First, you've got to have accountability in order for the other two to occur. Access to the higher education for the past 30 years, I want to share with you, this is my dissertation. I'm a little slow, 25 years later, I'm finishing it. But the past 30 years, tuition and fees has gone up by 400%, and the median income has only gone up by 17%. The gap is getting bigger and bigger between those who have and those who have not. Now, especially when it comes to the minorities and access. So, it is about how do you get, and by the way, just to let you know, Secretary Chu is coming to our campus July 2nd. Because of the ideas that was generated here, God didn't give me much of a good height, didn't give me much of a good look, but gave me a big nose, so I smell things. So I got the ideas right here, thank you, Tony, and I tell you, I took it right back to our campus. We did something really great by working with our congressional and legislators in the state of Delaware, with the governor. I went right around to their offices, and literally we made something happen that if it wasn't because of the synergy here, I wouldn't have had the energy to go back there and do it. Yeah. So, having said that, there is a national security. We got to connect the dots. The U.S. Department of Education and U.S. Department of Energy, that's what my speech is going to be when it comes to our campus, July 2nd. Now, as part of my dissertation, I'm saying, you know what, this is also national security. When you do not have access, when you cannot afford, and the gap is getting bigger and bigger, what do you think is going to happen? So really, in essence, we are, and please forgive me for those who are religious, we are in a bucket getting a smooth ride, but the destination is HELL. We got to change that, and the era of incrementalism is over. So how do we get those who are in the position of power to get their attention? Well, I have engaged Senator Coons, who is really a great senator from the great state of Delaware, and by the way, just plug it in, first state of Delaware. So I want to share with you that he is very excited, and I just gave my thoughts about that great document that Liz has done. And my good colleague from California has done a great job, Wendell, for some of the information that is coming out. And I just shared with Liz, in that document, I didn't see debt capacity. You may have revenue bonds, obligation bonds, municipality bonds, you have capital bonds, but what we don't have is Standard & Poor's and Moody's to step up, and by the way, I got them to step up. They are, but I can't get them to go to the Congress together because it's like, I have much better chance to have Israelis and Palestinians to go there, but than Moody's and S&P. But having said that, they are all up to this challenge, and I think it's time to come to say this is about national security, this is about U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Education, and U.S. Department of Energy getting together because this is big, and that's what my comment was.
Thank you very much. And there was one more, did you? Yes, one more for lunch.
Okay, if you wanted to hear from the corporate sector, my name's Ann Cutler, and I'm with Xerox, and yesterday I did speak to the steering committee about how to make yourself valuable as a student to a corporation like Xerox, which is huge into sustainability in all lines of our business, from research and development to obviously marketing. We need systems-based thinkers, problem solvers, big picture, flying fish out of water thinkers. We need technical people who need a strong basis in a chemistry or a math, but who also have some sensitivity to environmental. And we also need our liberal arts people to have some strong science. So it could be as simple, you don't have to reinvent your curriculum. Okay, how about your electives? Use your electives and advise the students who are going to take it. You're not going to not everybody's going to take this path. But for the ones who want to do it, maybe just using your electives. If they're studying environmental policy, have them take hydrology, have them take, modeling, calculus. Or if you have your chemistry students or your engineers, have them take some environmental policy. As an elective, it may not be that difficult to start out with.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Thank you. We have lunch instructions coming up. We have a panel at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2, and then 2 we do our final session where we try to take all of the ideas that have been expressed throughout the day and implement them. Tony?